Hello, everyone. This is Jason Zuidema of the North American Maritime Ministry Association. Welcome to this conversation on the impact of the coronavirus on seafarers' welfare provision in the United States. I'm happy today to be speaking to three leaders who have significant experience in this field. First, Lesley Warrick is Executive Director of Seafarers House in Fort Lauderdale. Deacon Paul Rosenblum is chaplain in Charleston, South Carolina, and serves as regional director for Stella Maris in United States, Canada, and the Caribbean. And Rev Marsh Drege is executive director of Seafarers International House in New York City, and Marsh currently serves as the president of NAMMA. Welcome to you all. Welcome to this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So starting with you, Marsh, can you describe the impact of the coronavirus crisis on your work? What's the impact to those who you serve? What's the impact on your ability to serve?
Well, I'm in New York City, and of course that's kind of the epicenter of the current most difficult part of the virus right now. And so we're just trying to balance all of the faith and the fear together as much as we can. The doing due diligence of keeping our staff and our guests and our seafarers safe, while at the same time, you know, not wanting to give up on the mission that we're called to do. And I think that's true for all of our agencies across North America. We want to be there, especially during this time of need, but it's such a difficult set of scenarios because we don't want to harm the people with whom we come in contact, or we don't want to harm ourselves. So it's very difficult. I would say that it's one of the most difficult things that I've gone through as a pastor and as a executive director, just trying to find that balance. And of course, a lot of people have said this before, but I would reiterate, we're really dealing with an invisible virus, an invisible enemy. And the irony is that seafarers are already invisible to many. And so you've got this strange combination where you're chasing, or as somebody said, you're painting fog. You're trying to deal with what the call is from our Lord to visit those who are sick or in prison, but at the same time, visiting them could imperil your life or the life of others. So it's a really difficult time. As for us, we have had to make the very difficult decision to partially close our Seafarers Guest House here in New York City for safety's sake. We still have some seafarers with us. The seafarers that we have with us are pretty much stranded here. They have nowhere else to go. So we are trying to keep them very much isolated to their rooms. We don't have any staff anymore. We've had to lay them off. So the seafarers, who are very capable, are cleaning their own rooms and doing their own policing of that area. And then we have port chaplains along the eastern seaboard. Each of them are finding different scenarios in different ports. It all is sort of an amalgam of whether or not the ship will allow them on or the terminal will allow them on. But right now we currently have 6 port chaplains, 4 of whom are not able to really make visits, 2 that are, 1 in Philadelphia and 1 here in New York. And I think one of the new parts of our nomenclature is the phrase gangway ministry, doing a lot of hand-ups, I call it, hand-ups up the gangway to still provide supplies and an assurance to the seafarers that we want to be there if we possibly can, while taking precautions like masks and gloves and that sort of thing. So that's where we are.
And Lesley, from your point of view, what is the coronavirus crisis? How has it impacted your work and your ability to serve seafarers at this difficult time?
Well, my bailiwick is the Port Everglades in South Florida, and anybody who knows the industry or cruises knows Port Everglades. And typically throughout the year, we would interact with over 150,000 crew members or members of our port community as the chaplaincy to the port. So it's a very busy place. And what has happened with us is we have, from the beginning, taken some very deliberate steps to, shall we say, curtail exposure and manage exposure. Our offices are split. We have the Mariners campus, which is where the things that we do with and for the seafarers occurs, and then our administrative offices are in a separate building, thanks to the good graces of our own port. And so my admin team and I have been working remotely from very early on, and we thank God every day for the technology that makes that available and possible. And then on the Mariners campus, we have two small buildings that are have different functions, but they've remained open, although what we've ended up doing is sounds very similar to what Marsh describes. We are curtailing our hours. We've had staff members who said they were afraid to work, and we didn't say you had to work. We have to manage costs. So on both the admin side and the operations side, we've had some furloughs already. When we do have folks come through the little casa, these days it's largely port workers, and that's a population that gets overlooked. They're on the front lines of this too, and we from the get-go, we filled the casa with hand sanitizer. I'm a little bit obsessive about these things, so I had purchased some like months ago. So we were able to find it, and it's out on all the tables. And I had an interaction with a port worker where he came in to buy something in our little store, and 6 feet apart, very friendly, nice conversation. Before he left, he walked right over, got that hand sanitizer. So it's being used constantly. Keeping up with that has been an interesting project. We are always on the lookout for hand sanitizer. But we've posted everything we can in the way of information to the general populace using our facilities, all of the CDC reports, and our chaplains are no longer interacting directly with the port community or the seafarers. We've gone to a virtual form of interaction. And the other thing that we've started doing, which those of you who follow us on Facebook will see, is that we're putting regular prayers up on Facebook for the seafarers, and we're taking different tacks on that. Some of them are direct interviews with our chaplains, and others are simple written prayers. For us, it's very important to be with these people and to come alongside them in the best way that we possibly can under their circumstances, with all the same issues that Marsh describes. We have to keep ourselves safe. We have to keep our staff safe. We have to keep our community safe. We certainly do not want to be in a situation where we are viewed as somebody who's contributing to the problem rather than helping to solve it. And the thing that came to me just within the last 24 hours is that I feel that this is a situation where we are working with scarcity in the midst of plenty. And it came to me because some of the obvious stuff, like we can't find the things that people want to have in their homes for quarantining. But one of the things we've done is we've started having staff meetings weekly by phone, and my staff are constantly back and forth texting one another. There's a whole staff chain that's happening where we're all keeping in touch. And it made me think, this morning, every morning we start with a prayer. Somebody says the prayer, whether it's my Cynthia or my chaplain. Somebody wakes us up at 8:30 with that first message, says, good morning, everybody. God bless us all. Today's another great day from God. And Cynthia used the term extended family today. And I think we really do feel that way, and in a bigger way. I'm seeing it in my own interactions. I'm calling friends and family I haven't talked to in a long time, and so there's this need, which is what I'm talking about with the scarcity. You feel that need to interact and to connect at any level you can. And my little Seafarers House family, we miss one another. We can't see one another routinely. And we miss being able to hug and being able to stand around and joke with one another and to support one another. And you take that out into the next level and imagine what this is like for seafarers who are stuck on ships and presumably social distancing and can't see their own families and loved ones. And it just breaks our hearts. So we want to keep being there for them as much as we can. I don't know if I've answered the question.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Deacon Paul, from your perspective locally in the AOS network, what are you seeing? What's the impact of this crisis?
Well, locally here in Charleston, we are pretty much at a standstill as far as the ministry goes. We have never received any official notification to stop our ministry from the Coast Guard or CBP or even the Ports Authority. Although this morning the mayor of Charleston has put a essential people only going outside. So I'm at the center right now at North Charleston for what might be the last time for the duration. There is very little, the port is open and there are ships coming in, but I have not seen a seafarer come off a ship for about 8 or 10 days now. And when I come in the mornings, in the past, when I come in the mornings, the chairs would be all over the place and things would be in disarray. But now it's exactly how I left it. Nothing has been moved, so there is no activity. It's put up notices. I want the seafarers to know that the restrictions we're operating under are not because we're afraid of them, but because perhaps they ought to be a little afraid of us. We are the vectors right now, and they understand that, I think. So we are operating pretty much with 3 people doing things. Myself, the Charleston Port and Seafarers Society chaplain is still active, the administrator is still active, but all of the volunteers we are told to stay away. There's no need for them to even be coming out to ports any longer. It's a strange thing not to have people milling around here at all times. And although I complain about having to clean up every time I come in the morning, it's really kind of, I miss having to clean up every time I come in the morning. What I hear from my colleagues around the States and Canada is that it's a very variable situation. Nearly all centers have been closed. There are some places where ship visits are still being allowed. And again, this is something that's determined by the vessel itself. Where we can try to go on, we try to go on, but in most cases, they ask us not to come on board. So Marsh used the gangway ministry. We were seeing that as well around the country and Canada as well. One thing we have to also answer to, even though the government authorities have not told us to do anything, we answer to a higher authority, that is our bishops. And most bishops around the country, as far as I know, at least in the ports that I'm familiar with, have mandated that all public ministry be stopped. The one exception is for priests to bring viaticum to the dying. All other public ministry is stopped, and so I cannot bring, even if I go and may see seafarers, I cannot do any kind of communion service or anything like that. That's all been stopped. And when the bishop says stop doing your ministry, we answer to that as well. And that's the case in a number of ports around the country and in Canada as well. The bishops have put the stop order in for our ministries. And so we do what we can, post things on Facebook, prayers, messages, encouraging things, and just pray that we get back to whatever passes for normal in the near future.
So a last question for all of you, and brief responses on this one. In a few words, how are you and your teams planning to adapt and deal with the situation? What do you think would be the main principle in adapting and dealing with the situation? If I could start with you, Deacon Paul, and then Lesley, and lastly with Marsh.
Well, I think that, some of us have always had difficulty moving into the 21st century in terms of technology. I think we have to do a better job of doing that and being finding different ways of doing that. Facebook is a good way to do that. I'm sure there are other ways, and I'm in the process of sending out a newsletter to try to get ideas that I can share. How are you, asking the chaplains around the country how they're doing it. So there are methods available, but I think we just have to be a little bit more proactive in our social media use. That's about all that I think we can begin doing at this time, and keep letting the seafarers know that we are there for them, even though we're not really there for them in person any longer.
Lesley?
Well, I have to agree with what Paul is saying. We've had to learn to carry our work into the virtual world to some degree. But the longer term for us is what's frightening, because one of the things that was the natural result of what's happened is our mission functions, its operating funds come from a gala fundraiser that we typically have in the spring, and that gets us through the summer to the end of the fall. And we had to postpone that until September. So now I'm looking at cash flow for the next 6 months, and it's not a pretty picture. And so our concerns have become, how do we continue to care for the population that we do care so much for, and at the same time keep our doors open? My greatest fear is that we do end up having to close our doors, perhaps furlough my team, and then what do I do when it's time to ramp up? I'm suddenly overwhelmed by demand and the needs of the people that we wish to serve. And so we are taking a creative look at ways to fundraise and ways to stretch every dollar that we have.
And finally, Marsh, any thoughts on how to adapt, deal with the current situation?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of what Lesley just refers to, a lot of pinching pennies and trying to be very frugal. Our financial engine is our guest house, and in 3 months we will have lost $600,000 or more. And so we have laid off folks. We're trying to shoulder on as best as we can with the few folks that we have left. So we're trying to be good stewards of our resources and good stewards of our staff and keep everybody healthy. I think that what we're doing is being very careful with money at this time, but also being very clear that our faith is in the one who is faithful and is going to keep us under the shelter of that wing. And We have a God who is promised to be in our boats with us, even though the ocean seems so big and our boats seem so small. We have been a seafarer organization for 147 years, and we want to continue that. We believe that God is wanting us to continue that, and so we're going to do whatever we can to keep faithful to that call and smart at the same time about the revenue that we are missing. And so therein lies the faith.
Thank you to all three of you for this these minutes together in this conversation, and I pray for all of you, and thank you for sharing your perspective on the current situation.
Thank
Very
you.
well.